Welcome to my podcast, You Must Be Out of Your Mind. My name is Dr. Don Wood. I use my knowledge of neuroscience to create what I call a memory reset. This reduces and eliminates the impact of trauma. I can't wait to share with you how the impossible is possible and why you must be out of your mind. Well, welcome everybody to another episode and podcast of You Must Be Out of Your Mind. I'm Dr. Don Wood. And as you know, we always bring on these great guests that provide such amazing insight, and it really ties into what we do. And my next guest is actually perfect for what we do. And we're working and talking together about maybe doing some things together because I love what the message that she's conveying out there, and it ties in with what we do. So I want to welcome Hilary Russo to the You Must Be Out of Your Mind. Welcome, Hilary.
Thank you so much for having me. It's such a pleasure to be on the show.
Well, I was so excited when we got connected and we had a chance to talk, and I just love what you do. But rather than me try to tell everybody, why don't you explain it? Because you'll do a much better job.
Oh, well, thank you so much. Well, I am
a holistic coach. So
I am the Hilistically Speaking Health Coach. I love a good play on words. So I work in holistic health. I'm an integrative nutrition practitioner. I'm also a mental health practitioner, and I focus predominantly in an area called havening techniques. I'm one of the first 500 that is certified in this modality or one of the first 500 in the world and first 150 in the country. There's only about 700 of us in the world. And what it is, it's a neuroscience-based approach that uses touch and pleasant distraction to alter the landscape of the brain. Basically, we call it CPR for the amygdala because our brain loves to go to fight or flight, right? We have to protect Amy. So the idea of what havening is it's using touch to put the brain in what they call a delta wave state. And the delta waves are where the magic happens. We really don't get there unless we're in the sleep state. That's what delta waves are. And when that happens, it brings about a sense of calm. It releases the oxytocin, the serotonin, the dopamine, the GABA in the brain so that we can make better decisions. And it's great for those everyday upsets to deep-rooted trauma. And as a trauma-informed practitioner and also hypnotherapist, I use this in my practice regularly, which is really important to hold space for people when they're stuck, when they need to get to the root of the issue. And things and using tools like havening can be a self-regulated tool as well that we put in their own hands.
So they can do it themselves
Yes.
as well. You train them to do it themselves?
Yeah, so it is both can be facilitated by a practitioner like myself, because as you know, working in this field as well, it's never a good idea to deal with the deeper upsets, the trauma work on your own. You should always be in a safe space, feel that you have somebody who is trauma informed, trauma educated, works in that field, that understands what it's like to hold space for you when you need it. But for the everyday things, for the, being stuck in traffic, not being able to focus, test taking. I mean, I'm a college professor too. I use it with my students all the time, or just the little irks that come up in the day that we have many, right? We have thousands of thoughts a day and not all of them are positive. So when we have those feelings where we are not in the most positive space, being able to self-regulate ourselves is really important. And that is the beauty of the modality and approach like havening techniques, because while it's neuroscience based, you have the tools in your own hands, literally, to be able to change your thoughts, moods, behaviors, and habits.
I love that.
Yeah.
So how long does it take? So if somebody wants to use it on their own, what would they be doing?
Sure. The ease of it, I mean, it changes rapidly. This is an approach that actually has a rapid change with your brain. And it can be in as little as minutes. I mean, you could sit there in 2 minutes. I wake up every morning and do gratitude moments without fail. I don't look at my phone. There's studies out by the Harvard Research Review that says that 2 minutes of gratitude in the morning, before you touch your phone, before you read your emails, before you do anything, if you start your day with 2 minutes, you are 27% more likely to have a really good day 6 to 8 hours later. So those 2 minutes are really important to me. I wake up and I do a little self-havening in the morning. I just gently touch myself on my arms or my hands. It's almost like you're washing your hands, or maybe going from your shoulders down to your elbows in a gentle stroke, or even on your face, because we have so many nerves on our face as well. Those are the 3 different havening touches. And when you pair that with something like a positive distraction or a pleasant distraction, which could be thinking of a really great vacation you had or humming a tune, anything that brings you joy is a pleasant distraction. So when you're having a level of upset and you pair it with the havening touch and that distraction, distraction, that's where that little twist happens. And you're kind of telling your amygdala that loves to be in fight or flight, oh, I'm safe. I'm okay. Which is why we call it havening, like a safe haven. And
Oh, okay.
that's
the term. Yep.
right. Because think about it, Doctor, when you are in a place, when you have a child and a child falls and skins its knee, the first thing you do is you grab that child and you say, it's okay. Everything's okay. The worst is over. Right.
Yep.
And that's basically what you're telling your amygdala. You're telling the brain, the worst is over. Are those 5 to 10 minutes of upset really meaning that the entire day is bad? Because we love to go into the fatalist approach, right?
Yep.
And this is a way of bringing yourself back and empowering yourself to change the trajectory of your brain, that neuroplasticity, and really change the brain waves to get into that habit of, oh, I can change the way I feel. You really do choose to choose, right?
Yep. And what's interesting is, a lot of people don't understand how quick you can do this, right? Yeah. Because your system basically is operating in the present, right? So your subconscious is now. So if you start to do those kinds of techniques, your mind is going to go, oh, I'm safe now. Perfect. Yeah. It'll calm down.
And that's the beauty of any work we really do, is where we're really learning to change the way we think, is that the brain doesn't know if something's happening right now or later. The brain doesn't understand the landscape. If you go into freak out mode, the brain's thinking something's happening right now. So a perfect example is if you get into a fender bender, and the minute you pass that intersection again, that you had that fender bender 5 years ago, your brain is going to think it's happening right now, because what happens? You get clammy hands, your heart starts racing, your foot goes to pedal to the metal because you're like, get me out of danger. And what havening kind of does is it allows you to realize you're safe, you're okay. It's not happening right now. It's almost like that Jack in the Box. Every time we see that Jack in the Box, right? And they're all the same, right? The minute the Jack in the Box and you turn that handle and it plays Pop Goes the Weasel, the minute it opens up, you kind of pop back because something's coming at you. Havening's kind of like the wire cutters that cuts that wire. And Jack's still in there, and Jack might still come out, but he's not coming out at you full throttle. So you have a minute to kind of think about things. And that's kind of what havening's like, the wire cutters in that situation. Because like if something is a trauma, by definition, to be trauma encoded, it has to be an event that took place. There has to be a landscape to it, to the brain. There has to be a meaning that you put to it. And there has to be a feeling of inescapability. That's trauma encoding. Right. So when you have those things present, you can honestly tell the brain, it's okay. You're safe. The worst is over. Bring it back, bring it down, find that sense of calm. And it can really be used for anything from, like I said, the everyday upsets to stress, anxiety, feelings associated with depression, PTSD, chronic pain. I mean, I'm a survivor of a traumatic surgery from having TMJ, and trauma lives in your body, as you know, for as long as you allow it to. It's just how much you're going to let it be that volcano, right? And how much you're just going to have it be dormant and take it and have the control over it.
Yeah, we use something similar. So it's not havening, but it's a different kind, but it's the same principle, right? We get the mind to recognize a particular symbol, statement, and anchor as safety. And when you use that, the mind goes, well, I can't be in danger if I'm experiencing this now. And so it's made that association and connection to it. So it instantly calms down. And so it just works.
And that's the beauty of what you're doing and what I'm doing, is that the more tools we have in the toolbox, the better. What might be right for somebody that you're supporting might be different for someone unsupporting. They might decide that they love both things that are in the toolbox, because sometimes you need the hammer. Sometimes you need the screwdriver, right? Yep. Sometimes you need the support of Dr. Wood or Hilary Russo to help you hold up the shelf a little bit, so it's level. And that's, I think, the beauty. Like I call it brain candy. It's the sweetest ways to be kind to your mind. And we have that ability to really pick out what we want from the brain candy jar and decide what we need in that moment.
Yeah, no, I like that. I love the terminology you use. It's excellent. So people get that, right? So it's
they do. Who doesn't love candy?
Really, exactly. When we talk about, one of the things I wanted to bring up too is a lot of the studies are showing that after these school shootings, that where most of the post-traumatic stress seems to be coming from is when the children see their parents for the first time. And just like you were talking about, they're looking for, hold me, I'm safe. And they see panic and fear. And all of a sudden they realize the world's not safe. Even my parents don't feel safe right now. And so they're trying to counsel parents that when you see your child, you have to be, not that you really want to be smiling in this situation, but you've got to appear friendly and safe for them to approach you. And that calms their system down.
It's very similar to some of the work that I do with first responders or journalists. And, they are taught to be in a calm state. You're not going to be picked up in an ambulance with someone freaking out. They are very well aware of crisis intervention. And the more tools they have, and that's, I have a seminar coming up where I'm speaking about this, that is sharing Havening with them, because what that's doing is giving them the tools, like I said, to when they are in that crisis situation, whether it is somebody working as an EMT or a mom or dad, to say the worst is over, you're safe, you're here now. And if our nervous system is leveled out and we're in a calm state, it's going to impact that person that is feeling the trauma or the upset in the moment. So you mentioned schools, and this is actually an approach that we are putting in over 10,000 schools right now. That's part of a program that was created by one of the moms of Sandy Hook, who lost her 6-year-old, Scarlett Lewis, and she has the Choose Love movement, and she's affiliated with us, and I'm one of her brand ambassadors as well, because if we're teaching kids how to self-regulate, perhaps they will make different choices from those who have made really poor choices that have led to the loss of life of a number of children and adults.
Right. That was fascinating. I wanted to talk a little bit more too, but you work with journalists, right?
I do.
So, because you are one as well. So tell me a little bit about that, because that's, most people don't realize that the trauma that they do face.
Absolutely.
People just think, you don't go to war and you don't go to these accidents and all these things without there's some residue that shows up in your life. So talk a little bit about what you've experienced or.
I call it broadcast burnout. It's one of the programs that I do. And as a journalist, I was a young journalist on air during 9/11. I had no tools to understand how to deal with that 20 years ago. I was a young journalist. I'm witnessing this. It was secondary trauma for me because I wasn't in the trenches. I wasn't in New York, even though I'm from New York. I was feeling the residual effects of watching all the news feeds, not knowing what's going on. But I've also been out on a lot of stories and a lot of things that I've seen that could really impact me as secondary trauma, some of it primary. And honestly, we have a moral injury in this. Where we've seen this happen so frequently, where a journalist or a photojournalist, do they keep recording, or do they put their camera down to help the person that's drowning in the car because the hurricane is hitting and they need to put their camera down to help that person? We saw that firsthand in a recent Floridian hurricane, right? So these are the kind of things that I touch on with my journalists that I serve. As a journalist, I'm still a journalist. I work in health and wellness, so I see a lot just focusing on that area, from the opioid crisis to COVID, to all the things that I've been facing as a journalist recently. I still had to take a step back and protect my own emotional well-being. So when I work with journalists, I go to TV stations around the country, also conventions, conferences where journalists frequent those big conferences, because if they have the tools to know how to deal with this and self-regulate before they go out on a story or while they're on the story, or when they're sitting in one of those edit bays, having to look at the imagery over and over again, or the guys in master control that are watching all those televisions and seeing all the imagery, everyone in those news stations is getting it. And as someone who is truly a journalist and has been doing this for almost 30 years, I get it. And if I can serve my fellow journalists in a way, then I'm going to do it. And I love meeting with them because I know what it's like to be in front of the camera, behind the camera, producing, writing. All of that is secondary trauma. And the more tools they have, the better they're going to be at what they do and be compassionate journalists.
Yeah, and they'll probably be able to, that won't come home with them, right? Because that's the big thing, right? Bringing it home. So many of the first responders, They can be great out in the field and they've got all their tools, but then they come home and that's their place that they sometimes can't regulate. And
Yeah.
that shows up in all kinds of issues in their homes, from divorces to maybe even domestic violence.
Yes. And another thing that I've witnessed a lot as being somebody who was military dependent, a lot of times in the smaller markets as well, a lot of the journalists are married or their spouses are policemen and women, or they are military men and women. So I have a very strong connection to the military and our first responders because of that. And I witnessed that firsthand, waiting for my own, spouse to come home, wondering where they were during the different conflicts and wars that we've had. And as a journalist, is it a conflict of interest? So there are a lot of things that stand between the journalist, especially if their family life includes somebody who is a first responder or working in the fire department or working in the police department or working in the military, which is more common than it isn't, especially in the smaller markets.
Very interesting. Yeah,
Mhm.
never thought about that. So now you
Yeah,
got both people with their
right.
own trauma coming home, right? And that can become a collision
It
if
can
they're
be.
not taught how to regulate it.
Mhm.
Because that's what I always talk about. It really comes down to a disruption of the nervous system,
Mhm.
right? And
Yeah.
so trauma continues to loop, as you know, right? And that continues to activate our nervous system even when nothing is happening. And so all it takes is a sound, a smell, things like that that can activate. And I always talk about, Hilary, I say activate, I don't say trigger. I
Mhm.
say, what is activating your nervous system? Because I always thought the word trigger sounded negative and violent to me. And
Mhm.
I always say, I don't believe your mind is negative and violent. It's actually trying to protect you. It's
Mhm.
calling you into some sort of an action, but it may be an error message because it's looking at old data from something that happened 5 years ago. Like you mentioned the car accident. Why do you speed through that intersection? Because your mind and your heart's pounding and your hands are clammy, right? So you're thinking, what's wrong with me? Well, there's nothing
Mhm.
wrong with you, right? Your mind thinks that there's an accident about to happen because it's viewing the old data in
Mhm.
real time.
Mhm.
And so we can, and what we do in our TIPP program is we reset that old data so that the mind no longer sees it as real. And so the way I explain it, I say, we're going to do the opposite of what they did with the Wizard of Oz. We're going to take that data that was originally recorded in high definition, color, and we're going to switch it. So Wizard of Oz went from black and white to color. We're going to go from color to black and white.
Oh, I like that. I like
And
that.
then
And I love how you're aligning. I align with you on the activation. I don't like really using the word trigger either, because words have power.
they
How
do.
we talk to ourselves, how we talk to others. And I get a lot of people that laugh at me about this. They're like, "Oh, you're so much about your words and oh, everything about language." I'm like, "Yes,
Yes.
language matters. Word choice matters. How you say a sentence and the inflection of your voice can make a big difference. The words you choose and use towards others and yourselves makes a heavy impact." So a word like trigger compared to activate, which can be a really positive word, right?
Yep.
Makes a big difference. And your TIPP program reminds me very much of my Hug It Out program, which I have a program, which is, it's an acronym. Hug It Out is about healing, understanding, and gratitude. And when you have those three implemented into your life, you can make a really big difference. And when you have any upset in your life and you're activated, you won't know unless your first step is to be aware of it, right? And once you're in awareness, you can move into a state of, okay, I'm going to allow a change to happen. I choose empower yourself, because I don't have the ability to empower anyone or heal anyone. I'm just guiding you to do this yourself.
Right.
And once you have that awareness and that allowance, then you can move into that state of alignment. And when alignment happens, then that's where the real power happens. You can really empower yourself to change the total trajectory of things. And it can be from the littlest things that are irking you on the everyday to like the bigger things that have been living in you for so long that are keeping you stuck. It's time to be unstuck,
Yeah.
and find that purpose and live your life powerfully the way you want to and deserve to. And it's really easy when you give yourself permission to go there. Right.
Exactly. It's interesting because that's the word I hear a lot. And I'm sure you do as well. When they describe how they're feeling, and it's stuckness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I said, the reason you're stuck is not because your mind is trying to hurt you, right? It's that almost a freeze mode, trying
Protect
to
you.
protect you,
Yeah.
right? So, and I talk about with depression, when people say, oh, I have depression, I say depression is a function of the brain, not a dysfunction of the brain. It's actually trying to protect you. It's in pain, so it's shutting down to try to stop some pain. But then people look at the symptom of depression and think that's the problem. It's generally not the problem. It's coming from somewhere. Your
Yeah.
mind is trying to create some sort of a response to something that's been trying to fix, but it can't fix it. So it quiets down.
And what's really beautiful about that for your listeners and those who are watching is that it's even more empowering to know that your body is there to protect you. Your mind is there to protect you. When you look at it as like, when people are hurt, when relationship breakups, when you're injured, you're going to go into protection mode. But how beautiful is it to know that you have a body and a mind that wants to protect you? But it's just a difference of how do you want it to protect you? You can still protect yourself and take the power back, right? Or you can allow yourself to live within the wall and put up walls to not let anything in to actually help you in the healing process. Where do you want to be on that side of the wall, basically,
And it's very easy because of the way we label people in the mental health industry. I have anxiety, I have depression, it becomes a badge. And as opposed, so they become a victim of something. And what I say is, there's nothing wrong with you, right? If your mind thinks that you're about to be hurt, doesn't it make sense that it would activate your nervous system and you would feel fear? That makes perfect sense. That's exactly what your mind and your body are designed to do, is to activate if there's a threat. That's not the problem. The problem is, why is it activating? And it's activating because you had some trauma, whether that was from childhood or whatever, and your mind is viewing it in real time. It's a glitch, an error message. Let's just reset it so that your mind stops calling for that action. It's really that simple. When you give people the science and education behind it, what I hear all the time is, this is making so much sense now. Yeah, there is nothing wrong with me. Of course my mind would do that. How could it not do that? It's designed to.
Very much so. It is. And I love that we're doing more work now studying the brain. I think there is a lot of people out there that are actually making some powerful steps to try to be more aware of how much power the brain really has, how much our thoughts really matter. I mean, we have 50 to 70,000 thoughts a day, and not all of them are positive, right? So it's up to us to choose good ones, right? And you can't be, rainbows and butterflies 24/7, right? I'm sure the Dalai Lama even has his moments, but you can certainly do your best to bring yourself, or be aware, like that first step I mentioned, be aware of when you're not feeling so good. And it's not about not feeling good, right? I mean, all parts matter. If you've ever looked into parts work, and we talked about, parts work, it's not about getting rid of those things. Like any story that's happened in your life, any upset or trauma that you have lived through in your life is always going to be a part of who you are. That's what makes you be able to be be successful, be thriving, be out there doing what you do, because your story is part of who you are. The difference is you have the ability to change the narrative, right? And I think that's going back to what you're saying about the victim. And I tell that to my clients all the time. We've all have stories in the pages before us, but you can turn that page, start with a clean slate and say, okay, I know it's in chapter 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Fine. That's still there, but I don't have to bring that with me and not start anew on this clean page. That's where your power comes from. That's where your purpose comes from. That's where your passion comes from. And it all has to happen when you are in a place where you're open to healing.
Yeah, and that's the key. And so what I always say is, we're not going to change what happened to you. It's impossible to do. We're going to change the way your mind responds to it.
Yes.
That's all we're going to do. We're going to reset. Your brain is a giant computer. It's been coding your entire life, and it's basically recorded and coded responses to that event. It
Mhm.
recorded it in real time when it happened and is continuing to run the codes. So all we have to do is reset it. And I always say, if every time you hit your M key on your computer shut off, you wouldn't get rid of the computer. You would take it and say, something is coded wrong,
Mhm.
right? We need to reset the code so the M key doesn't shut off the computer. And then once you reset the M key, it becomes an M key again.
Mhm.
But traditionally, what we're going to do is, if we use that analogy in mental health, we would say, oh, well, don't think about M's. Don't think about words with M's in them. Don't even write words with M's in them, right?
Right.
That's not going to fix it,
No.
right? That's avoiding it and moving around it and managing and coping and living with an M key that's not working the way it's supposed to.
Mhm.
So let's just get it and reset it. And
Yeah.
then it becomes an M key again. We're designed to heal, as you know, right? Our
Yes.
minds and bodies are designed to heal.
I
What's
love that.
interfering with the healing? And
Mhm.
generally it's trauma. And so trauma, so if you're being chased by a lion, your mind is going to be focused on escaping the lion and not doing maintenance. So you could run on jagged rocks and bare feet when the lion's chasing you, and you're not going to feel any pain, because your mind's going to say it's not important right now to alert you to this problem. Let's get
Mhm.
away from the lion. When you get away from the lion, now you're going to feel the pain, and now the maintenance is going to start. But
Mhm.
people who have trauma are in a perpetual state of running, like you talked about, getting the amygdala running all the time. So it's running because it thinks there's something wrong and there's something
Right.
happening. That's
Right.
slow down maintenance.
It's understanding the difference between your sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system for sure. I think
Yeah,
the more people are aware of how things work, and listen, I think people probably come to us because they just want to get rid of the upsets and the pain,
yeah,
and I understand that. And not everyone wants to know all about the neuroscience behind everything. It's basically like, just help me feel better. Just
right.
help me find my purpose. Just help me uh deal with things differently, whatever the upset is. And I get that. And it's meeting people where they're at, because every client's different, right? Every workshop's different, every conference is different. And it's having a really clear understanding of who you are serving, because it's all bio individuality, but there is a need and a want and desire to help people. But it's really people needing to understand that you're here because you want to help yourself. And that is where the empowerment really comes into play. They don't have to understand the entire neuroscience and what's going on in the brain, right? You get a couple people that are the neuro nerds. I get it. And that's where I get to play a little bit, right? Because I'm a little
Yeah.
neuro nerdy too.
Yeah.
But, you know, I think it's helping them have a clear understanding of what's happening without getting too sciencey. But then if they want a little more, you have the ability to share with them what is going on, because sometimes it's just kind of insane how the brain works. When I was first, I got to be honest, when I first started this work, and, like I said, my background is 25, 30 years as a journalist, and realizing that I want to really hold space for others. I became an integrative nutrition health coach, helping a lot of people on their wellness and their weight loss journeys, because I've been there myself. And a lot of times my clients I'm mirroring back the kind of clients I am, right? The client I am. And part of that was just realizing that there needs to just be more guides by the side of people,
Yeah.
because as you might know, even doctors will say this, they're not trained in nutrition. They don't go to medical school and learn anything. They might take an elective, and they'll be the first to tell you. Fortunately, now we're seeing more doctors taking functional medicine classes, more classes in holistic health, which is great, because I love working with those kind of doctors. But then it's just aligning with other coaches, practitioners like yourself, where we create this collaborative, so that it's letting people know they have choices and they have support where they need it. And they're never going to run out of that support if they're just open to the possibility of change.
Yeah. And as long as they're willing to be open to it, then their mind is going to be open to it.
Yeah.
Right. And then
Yeah.
all of a sudden is, what's that message that when the student is ready, the teacher arrives?
That's right.
Yep.
Yeah. I think I
So,
felt that too, because what I was saying before, I had never, before I did the havening techniques, before I got into this, I was just a girl that met a friend at a birthday party and we're talking about what each other did. And and she said, well, I do havening. And I'm like, what's that? And she did a little bit on me while we were standing in the bar. She's like, do you mind if I just touch you on your shoulders? And she did it. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't know what this is, but I want to learn more. I wound up going to a 3-day workshop where the doctors, Dr. Steve and Ron Rudin, who are the developers, were doing it. And Dr. Ron was the first person to ever haven me. And he havened me on the death of my father, which had been a major trauma in my life, being a child of a father who was sick my whole life. And then on my TMJ, which was my chronic pain from jaw surgery. So that one day of being havened changed the trajectory of me knowing what was possible out there for my own healing.
Yep.
Right. And I think that's a really powerful distinction, is when you have practitioners, when you have coaches that aren't just preaching it, they've lived it.
Yeah.
And we just want people to feel better because we know what it's like to feel better. Right.
And I deal with a lot of people in addiction, it's really interesting because I've never had a drink in my life, never once, never touched a drug in my life, right? And I help people with addiction. And it was like, what do you know about addiction? You've never even had a drink of alcohol, right? You've never touched a drug. And before I really understood how the brain works and how all this works, I thought the same thing as most people, is that addiction was some sort of a weakness in their character, weakness and willpower. And now what I understand, it has nothing to do with that. It's not about character, willpower, morals, or ethics. It's all about pain. And so the subconscious mind wants to be out of pain. When does it want to be out of pain? Now. So it can't see a consequence to drugs and alcohol because it solved the problem. So somebody takes that drug or takes the alcohol. When did they stop the pain? Now. Perfect solution. What they don't understand is the brain codes. So the more you use it, now you're building up a code, an association with the drugs and alcohol with the pain relief. So what's going to happen when the pain comes in again? The mind goes back and says, what do we know about this pain? Oh yeah, let's go grab that drug or grab that drink. That's going to stop it. And so then the code becomes very strong, and that's why they can't get out of it, because they don't understand it.
Right. And what's the lesser of the two evils, really? I remember doing a story on the opioid crisis, and I was interviewing a young woman who is now a crisis counselor. She's clean. And I remember this comment she said just sits with me to this day. And this, a lot of people have misconceptions about the opioid crisis and thinking that people are just drug addicts. Yeah. It's like, I think that couldn't be farther from the truth. A lot of these people are just soccer moms who had to get a knee surgery. And she said the difference between having the drug was like getting rid of the pain or having your fingernails pulled out from under your, if that could not be any more visual, because the pain subsiding was due to this drug getting rid of the pain. So you're either feeling this way or you're feeling this way. And I've had that when I work with clients in that area as well, in addiction. It's a powerful tool to put in their hands, because at first they're like, I don't even want to, they're coming to you because they know they want help. But it is really powerful when they realize how simple it is to change the trajectory in their mind. But sometimes it's become like a safety net for them. Sure. So that pleasant distraction is changing it to a new safety net. Why not think about something pleasant? Why not let the brain know it's safe? And that's a really powerful place to be when you witness that shift in people, Well,
they've never had another resource.
Yeah, never.
So when we want to shame them and make them feel really bad, and yet at no point did they have any other resource to stop their pain. So people say to me, well, why would people use drugs and alcohol knowing all the consequences to it? I said, the reason people use drugs and alcohol is because it works. Yeah. It stops the pain, right? And and what I say to people, I haven't had your pain. If I had your pain, I would have probably found a resource too. So it doesn't say anything about who you are as a person. I get it now. And I had a guy who went through our program, and what he said was the difference between what you do and what traditional rehab was doing for me. He says, I'd get out of rehab and I couldn't stop thinking about wanting to use. I got out of your program and I don't think about it anymore. And this was a successful executive making good money, right? He, again, an injury, he got on opioids because he injured his knee on a job site, and innocently started getting into this, and then went into addiction and went to rehab multiple times. Now he had the money to do it and the resources to do it, but at the same time, they weren't fixing the problem. The problem wasn't the physical, just the physical pain. It was the code that got built.
Yeah.
And a lot of times it's, you go even further back, it may be the trauma that created the code. His was more of just an injury, but most people are coming in because they've had trauma and they've had no way to stop that trauma loop from running, constantly activating their nervous system. And they just like you said, why do people come to us? Because they want to feel better.
Yeah. And sometimes, and that upset and the addiction later in life or in their teen years, or that might not even be the original incident. We talk about the OI a lot in trauma, and that original incident, I know mine was like days after I was born. I know my OI, and I know that it's built on after that. I know I've had other series of traumas, like an injury when I was a year old, my surgery when I was 15. These are all encoded into us. And if we don't know that they're there or why we're feeling this way, or that we can hold space for ourselves to have a better understanding of our own trauma and not shame ourselves, but live well with it, then we really can change the entire way that our life can go. Your life can go. But it's really being aware of it first and not shaming yourself for having it, because we've all got stuff. We've all got stuff, right?
We all get at times in our lives, right? It all happens.
Yes, we all have stuff. And the minute we stop bullying ourselves and being that inner bully and shaming ourselves and the imposter syndrome and all the stuff that sometimes gets in the way of us making those powerful steps and taking those steps forward, when we get out of our own head, that's really where the healing can begin.
Yeah. And it's training, like anything, so if you talk to an Olympic athlete and you ask them, how did you get to become, the fastest person in the world? They could tell you step by step all the physical things that they did to get there, right? Well, we don't do that with the brain. And yet it's capable of becoming an Olympic athlete mentally, right? So take the same approach to the Olympic 100-meter sprinter as you do to your brain, and wow, your life will change so fast. You'll become an Olympic mental, athlete.
Yeah. Yeah. If we start thinking about the brain more as the muscle it is, right? We're constantly training our body. We're lifting weights. We're running. We're doing whatever we can for every other part of our body, but we're forgetting about the crown, the top, and what we can really, truly do to take control back and realize that that in itself is a muscle that needs to be trained. And sometimes it forgets, and sometimes you have to remind it and say, all right, where are you going with that thought? Bring it on back. Right. And then then you can kind of play with it a little bit too. The inner child starts to step in. I mean, we can go round and round on this one, but I have those moments too. I have people ask me like, you must be so calm and cool and collected all the time. I'm like, are you kidding me? I'm a human being. That tiger is in the corner every once in a while. We have to retrain the brain constantly. It's just that it gets easier for us the more we do it. And it might be a shorter bout of upset or stress or anxiety, but it lives in all of us, and we're human, and it's okay to not be okay, but it's even better when we feel okay,
Yeah. And I say that to everybody as well. I'll ask them that. Is it okay for you to be okay? And every once in a while, I don't know if you had the same thing. Every once in a while people go, well, I don't know, because it's not really fair. If I'm okay, but my mom isn't okay, or my child isn't okay. And then I go, however, let's look at it this way. When you're okay, everybody you love and care for are better. And they didn't have to do anything today.
Right.
Only you had to do something today. You improved their lives by allowing you to be okay.
Yeah.
Because you have a major impact in their life, right? Because they're going to be around. I'd love to use the story, the true story about Sully Sullenberg, who landed the plane, right? In the
I
Hudson.
remember that. Yeah.
And I talked to him about that. And I said, now, first of all, I didn't know you could land a jet in the river. Like, that was news to me.
The Hudson of all rivers too. It's a tidal estuary. It goes both ways. That's
Right.
even harder.
Yeah. I said, but you know what the most remarkable part of the story was? It wasn't landing the plane in the river. The most remarkable part of the story is how calm he stayed. So what happened is when he gets on the intercom and he's talking to the crew and he's talking to the passengers and he's saying, okay, this is what we're going to do. Listen to your crew, fasten your seat belts. I'm going to he talked like he was landing on runway 25.
He sure
Right?
did.
And so
Right.
now everybody's like, I guess he's going to do it. But if he had to be yelling, like, get in your seats and screaming at his crew, he couldn't have done his job as well.
Yeah. He would have created panic and crisis. And
So by getting everybody else to do their job better because they were calmer, it allowed him to do his job. So when you get your nervous system in regulation, you start to regulate the people around you, which allows you to execute your skill better.
So true. Just think about how much of a service you're doing rather than a disservice.
Yeah.
When you come across in a calm and cool, collected space. And that can be whether you're a parent, whether you're a friend, whether you're working as a crisis convention counselor, whatever you're doing, journalist, whoever you are, the more calm you are, the more you're going to create that environment around you. And if anything, if you don't create it around you, you're not able to, because we're only in charge of ourselves, right? At least you're calm. But I think that also goes back to sometimes people feel that level of guilt, using like grief, for example, when somebody passes on, somebody is feeling a level of grief, like I should be upset, I should be sad, it's not a woulda, coulda, shoulda, prada. It's like, you are what you are. You're feeling what you feel. You're going to go through certain stages. And if somebody's at a different stage and they're really grieving and you're kind of like, I'm feeling okay. Like maybe you have a different level of closure. So you don't need to meet them at that level of grief. Come to them to kind of help lift them up without taking away their feelings, right? You're not trying like, come on, get over it. You're just that state of calm. And once they start witnessing that, it's kind of hard not to want to be in that space because that feels better and looks better and sounds better. But a lot of times we tend to keep ourselves small,
Yeah.
am I worth this? And it does go back to worth a lot. Self-worth is a big one. I'm sure you deal with that a lot as well with those that you serve. But if you're not feeling that self-worth, it's very difficult to get past that until you have an awareness that you are worth something.
So what's going to happen if somebody has low self-worth? Chances are they're going to puff up and they're going to be very angry. Why are they doing that? To protect themselves.
Oh, it goes back to protection.
It comes back to protection and safety.
It really
So
does.
if they don't feel safe. Well, if I can be the loudest one in the room, right, everybody's going to back off and they won't attack me, right? So that can come in very easily. So when people have anger issues, what created that? Chances are there's some events and experiences that created it.
Yeah. And I think, something I do a lot when I do meditations or when I have retreats that I do, or even when I'm just doing the workshops, I'll do a short meditation, a evening meditation. It's how do you want to feel? How does it feel when this happens that where there's that moment of joy that you're thinking about right now? What is the feeling? Like hold on to that and bottle that.
Yeah.
Because the more you remind yourself of that feeling, the more likely you're going to want to go in that direction. But if you're not thinking about the feeling that you're having and you're just like, oh, I'm walking on the beach, whatever. But no. What's the feeling? How does it feel? What is it? What are the senses that are coming alive for you in that moment? People can go there. And it is so easy to change the way we think and the trajectory of where the brain wants to take us, because you can't be in the state of depression and joy at the same time. You can't be in crisis and calm and chaos at the same time, right? No. You choose to choose. I can't say it enough. So choose wisely.
And again, it comes down to training, right?
It does.
And having a good coach, someone like you, right,
Thank
that
you.
can give them that education, right, and understand. Because I always say, why does, and I use sports as an analogy all the time, but why does Tiger Woods have a coach? His coach couldn't beat Tiger Woods.
Right.
Not a chance. His coach is not better than Tiger, but he can see things that Tiger can't see.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so that's what a coach does for you, is sometimes you may not see the answer when it's really in front of you. And a coach can actually guide you, just like you talked about earlier, right? We're the guides. We're going to guide you to what you naturally have as an innate ability. You can actually do this. It's within you. You just haven't had access to it. We're going to show you how to access it, and you can do it all the time.
I love that you're saying that, because I say that to clients all the time, or those people who call and get a first, hug it out discovery call with me. I'm like, my whole mission is to help you see and mirror back at you what you might not see in yourself at the moment, but you will, because it's very hard sometimes to see it in ourselves. So being able to sit there as somebody who is really witnessing you and holding space for you and seeing in you what you don't see in yourself is what my job is. And then when I see the shift, you've done it yourself.
Yep.
And that's where the real beauty and the gem and the magic is.
And it's really amazing. I know you've got a lot of experience with this too, but one of the things that we do, and I do a 4-hour session, which is a long time to sit with somebody, but I'm very, very intentional in what I'm listening to, because so many times what I'll come back and I'll say, I've been listening very carefully to everything you've said to me. And a little earlier, you said something, and I'll explain what I heard. And they don't even know they're saying it, right? And I'll say, tell me what that means. Like, where's that coming from? And they'll go, oh my gosh, yeah, you're right. I never thought about that. Their answers, they have them. They just can't see them. They can't even hear them, right? And then when you bring those in and you say, let's look at this, why would you say that? There's a reason why your mind brought that thought to you or brought that message to you. So let's look at that.
Or you get in that pattern. You probably are hearing clients that are so used to their own dialogue and their narrative and their story that they've been saying over and over again. And to be witnessed and be told or that they've been heard, because they're not really hearing what they're saying.
No.
And when somebody else is like, hold on a second, repeat, are you saying that, and then you repeat it back, like a lot of neuro-linguistic programming there as well. Are you telling me that? And suddenly they're like, oh, did I just say that? I'm like, yeah. Have you been saying that to yourself for the past 25 years? Because perhaps that is where the disconnect is, right? Yeah. They're just not used to having anyone mirror it back. They're just used to their own story that they've been telling themselves. But when you're on the spin cycle, it's not going to stop unless someone presses stop, right? Yep. And slows the roll a little bit. So, yeah.
Well, I use too, when somebody says, I'm just a pessimist. I'm always pessimistic. And I'll say, well, I don't think you're pessimistic. And they'll go, oh, no, I'm really a pessimist. And I say, let's look at it this way. I don't believe you're a pessimist. I just think you're low on optimism.
Oh, that's good. I like that.
Let's improve your optimism fitness score.
I love it. Yeah, right? That's great.
It takes it out of that. So the reason why you feel like a pessimist is because you don't have enough optimism. Let's fuel you up.
Right. That's again using the powerful positive words. That's great.
Gratitude, right? Oh,
it is strategy.
I'm very grateful. No, you're just low on gratitude. Let's improve that fitness. I talk about it as fitness.
Yeah.
Resiliency is a fitness score. Optimism, gratitude, intuition. What is your score?
Love that.
Right? And so let's work on that. That's the training we're going to do. We're going to bring your mind into. So I'll ask them, what's your optimism fitness score? Oh, it's really low. Well, so you're 30%. That's not pessimistic. That's just low optimism.
Right. Well, it's giving them it's letting them know that they can raise it, giving them hope and something to strive for, just like you do if you're running the 100 meter and you want to run the 200 meter. Right. So it's letting them know there's still possibilities of that goal over there. Just take baby steps. You can get there. You don't have to get to like 100% optimism tomorrow. But what if you do 5% more tomorrow and then 5% more and then 5% more? And before you know it, you're like, oh, pessimism, what? That's great. I love
Yeah,
it.
like, who do you know that's a really optimistic person? What would you rate them on a scale? Oh, they're like at 95. So is that
Mm,
where would you want to get to? Would you like to
mm,
have that kind of optimism, that kind of a fitness in the optimism skill area?
yeah,
Okay,
that's great.
how are you going to do it? You're going to, just like training, we're going to train you in optimism,
Mm,
you
that's
know?
great. Yeah, I
That,
love the athlete analogies. Those are good.
and that's why I always use that, right? It all comes down to that. And the same thing I talk about when people say, oh, I sabotage myself. And I go, it's impossible. Your brain's
Yeah.
not capable of sabotage. It's survival based.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
it's not going to sabotage you. It's going to move you in another direction that will look like you just sabotaged yourself. Because just like it's, for example, you use your story of going through that intersection.
Mm-hmm.
All of a sudden you say, well, I never go through that intersection anymore. I'm sabotaging myself on my way to work because I go a different way. No, you're not. Your brain's trying to avoid that intersection
Mm-hmm.
because it thinks it's dangerous.
It's so much about the words we use. It really is. And when I go back to thinking about my Hug It Out program, and the healing, the understanding, the gratitude, the whole idea of hugging it out is like, when you're in an upset with someone and somebody will come along and be like, oh, can you guys just hug it out? Like, just come on. Right. Well, we need to start doing that to ourselves.
Yeah.
We need to really like make amends with ourselves, be kind to our own minds. And by hugging it out, you're saying that you're like releasing some of that ability to call it sabotage, or I'm the pessimist, or self-doubt, self-worth, all of those things that we say to ourselves that bring us down. It's time to kind of hug it out and say, I'm okay. And I can be better. And I might not be perfect, but I'm perfectly imperfect. And I'm working on that road to get better and be better for myself and those I care about and those around me, and that's really a powerful distinction, is understanding that there's still always something more that we can look forward to, but be happy in the perfect now too. Be happy where you are. The fact that you've come to somebody to seek help, the fact that last week, maybe you were 5% less of a optimist,
Right.
Or 5% less of like you're feeling more self-doubt. Like, look at it in the other direction. And if you're veering and not using that exit and you want to go somewhere else because that was where you had the accident, no, that's an awareness. Like, maybe I'll take a safer route because there's always congestion here, right? Those are making powerful choices. And the more people understand that you have a choice, the more empowered they become. And that starts right here with you, with me, and many other practitioners out there in the world that are here to support you and hold space for you, to guide you to see what you don't see in yourself.
Yep. And I love your hug it out, because that makes a lot of sense. When you explain to people that when you hug somebody, the longer you hug them, the more oxytocin that you're
Yep.
releasing, right? In your brain.
Yep.
Why does a hug feel good? It's not just because you think it feels good. It's actually physically changing your body.
It's the love hormone. And the beauty of that is that it's a coincidence, but it does play into havening as well, because you are self-hugging. When you are doing the havening touch, when you're crossing your arms, going from your shoulders down to your elbows, when you are doing a light hand movement, like you're washing your hands or just touching your face, you are self-hugging, you are self-applying, you are self-regulating, you are self-havening, you are providing yourself with that hug and that oxytocin. If you don't love yourself, how in the world can you expect anyone else to?
Right. Yeah.
It begins within.
So true.
Yeah.
Well, Hilary, we could probably talk for 4 more hours.
Like a session.
Yeah, like a session. Yeah, I have a tendency. I could go for 4 hours with you, but that's probably not too, it's going to be too much. So I appreciate you coming on. So
Thank you.
first of all, I want you to be able to share what with our audience, right? How can they reach you, or what would you
Sure.
like to share with them, right? I
Yeah.
think
Well, for those who are tuning into your podcast, I want to graciously offer an opportunity to experience a little bit of self-havening, and I am offering a free video download. So if you go to hilaryrusso.com, that's 1 L 2 S's /purpose, I have a video on how to find your purpose with havening, because a lot of times it comes back to finding your purpose. But I'm also going to be doing a Hug It Out challenge during the latter part of November into December, which is going to be 14 days with learning how to get unstuck, get in alignment with who you are, and really learn some powerful tools on a day by day to really stress less and be the powerful person you deserve to be. And then I'm also starting a weekly self-havening on Sunday mornings. That'll be a really beautiful way to self-care on my YouTube channel. And that's going to be starting in early December. So there's a lot of stuff going on. And most of that can be found out just by going to my website or following me on social media at Hilary Russo.
Well, I encourage everybody to do that. This is just
Thank you.
great information, and it's so powerful for what people can heal, right? And you just need to
Yes.
understand, you just bring in the right people, show you the right, and you can absolutely do it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for the time. And I'm looking forward to having you on Hilistically
Can't wait.
Speaking on my podcast as well. And that weekly podcast is Trauma to Triumphs Through Health, Healing, and Humor. So I'm really excited to have you come on and share more about you and everything you do with my audience.
That sounds great. Well, thank you again, Hilary, and thanks everybody for listening to another episode of You Must Be Out of Your Mind. And there it is.